Welcome to Edge of the Rabbit Hole. Once again, we are here by myself, Mike Ricksecker, and Vanessa Hogle, and we have a special guest tonight, Andrea Perron. Really excited to have her on, and I'm just looking at the chat here, and there's so many of you that are already down there in the chat room. Really appreciate everybody coming out. I think it was Jay from Michigan that was the first one in. Then I want to thank Glenda Dawson, Larry Davison for being in there early. I see Diane Hilbert's in there. A lot of people. I know Shana, our chat Shananigator, is going to be in there very shortly as well. Robert White from Australia, good to see you. And Vanessa, I'm really excited to have Andrea on.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, people were already messaging me on my personal page, like, get her to talk about this, get her to talk about this. I'm like, you know what? We just get Andrea on there, we just let her go.
Oh yeah.
She's interesting enough without any introduction.
Absolutely.
So, but yes, they do want to talk. They do want you to talk about what you believe the connection is between possible extraterrestrial spirits and ghosts. So I have to put that out there.
We're going to get into all that. Let's do our bit of housekeeping first. I'm really excited to hear what Andrea has to say about that. Well, of course, everybody knows that we have Ghosty here, our Hunter Media mascot. Of course, get you Ghosty. He has his own Facebook page. We do the Selfie with Ghosty hashtag. And then, of course, we have the, dropping them here, we have the Mad Hatters t-shirts. So for you Mad Hatters out there, we love you guys down there in the chat room. Make sure you get your Mad Hatters t-shirt. Also want to throw out there, I know we mentioned it last week, Jimmy Cortez is healing up, which is great. And I know there's somebody else that I was supposed to mention. So, and I'm forgetting off the top of my head, should have written it down, but I didn't. Well, I'll remember by the end of the show.
Yes.
We also
Absolutely.
have...
Went to the dentist. He's doing better.
Good.
Yeah.
We also have the Patreon page, so go ahead and check that out too. Patreon.com/hauntedroadmedia. It's another place to connect with us and our fantastic growing community here. I also put down below in the description the links to Andrea's books, House of Darkness, House of Light, and then In a Flicker. So really, really great books. I enjoyed them very, very much. So, but let's not waste any more time and bring on Andrea. Andrea, we're so happy to have you with us tonight. So how are you?
I'm so thrilled to be with you too. I'm very well, and I so appreciate both of you. You and I go way back.
We do.
Vanessa, you are newer into my world, but a soul sister nonetheless. And Mike, the first time I ever laid eyes on you, which was right across from my table when we were set up in Waverly, Ohio at the Emmett House, which has sadly burned to the ground under suspicious circumstances. Yeah. I just knew I would know you for the rest of my life. There was no question in my mind. It was what I think some people call a soul connection, or I just walked right over to you and I was like, hello, the boom. I mean, it was just, he glows, Vanessa, he does. And
that's
you
very
too.
kind.
It's so wonderful when you come together with people who are like-minded, people who are connected, truly connected to source, and understand that we're all here for a larger purpose than just meeting our day-to-day needs and selfishly circling the wagons around our particular existence. When you understand that you are part of one thing, that you are part of the universe, you are a member of the human race, a brother or a sister, it alters your entire perspective on life and the living of it. I think that an awful lot of people, and I'm going to go off on a tangent immediately because that is what I do.
That is.
We're at a really critical time, not only in our country, but on the planet, geopolitically and exopolitically. And one of the things that I want to talk about tonight when we get into dimensional beings is something that I have talked about at length Whether in lectures or on radio or TV or, wherever I happen to be. I don't pull any punches. We're a point of critical mass on this planet now. And we need to come to terms, come to grips, wake up. It's time for all of humanity to wake up. We have got to make that transition now, and it's a painful one. It's a difficult one, from three-dimensional, five-sensory living, where the vast majority of people on the planet let life live them instead of the other way around because of their circumstances. When we elevate our consciousness, when we bring our thought level up to a place where we understand that we are completely and utterly integrated with everything that we perceive to be around us, when in fact we are part of the whole, I think that that's when we will make the global leap. And it's in process. It's in process right now. And a perfect example of that is climate change and how it is being addressed around the world. And the anger of the world because of the regression of this country's dealing with that issue. That's important. That had to happen. It had to happen because it's what caused so many other people to rise up and say, no, 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 this is real. We are doing it to reverse it, and we have to do it now. And so the serious-minded of the planet who accept that science is real, that accept that all of the changes that have occurred over the last 2 to 2.5 centuries on the planet happened because of our burgeoning population and the way we warm our abodes and what we drive. The invention of motor vehicles exploded across the world. We've got a lot of things. I mean, when the Chinese have to close down every factory in Beijing for 2 weeks prior to the Olympics so that the athletes will be able to breathe the air in the city, my concern is not even so much for the athletes, because they come and go. What about the people that live there? What about those people?
Yeah, they're constantly. They're there perpetually.
Right.
So.
Right. So, they're, instead of them living longer, their death rate is skyrocketing, and there's a reason for that. And 1 + 1 = 2, and it always has, and it always will. And, it's, those of us on the planet that really take this whole notion of what is to me an obvious spiritual ascension that is taking place. In order for that to happen, there has to be upheaval. There has to be a shaking and waking and baking and turning up the heat at the base of the cauldron and letting what is toxic boil to the surface and even boil over before people understand that this is serious and that we've got a future ahead of us only if we allow it. Because the fact of the matter is that Mother Earth will do just fine without us.
That's true enough.
But in fact, she'll do better without us. But we can't live without her. And when...
Yeah, a lot of, and it's kind of interesting. I actually remember an old George Carlin joke where, he was going on about, there was, back in the day we called it Save the Planet. And ultimately, he pointed out, it's not about save the planet. The planet's going to be here. It's save us.
Right.
Yeah.
It is.
Well, and I think what Andrea is talking about, and correct me if I'm wrong, Andrea, but when you're talking about the uprising and the ascension of people and the difficulties that people have in understanding the importance of that, is because they can't get past the me to see the we, to see us as one large family.
Well, I find, and I don't think that this is too simplistic a comparison, in terms of comparative analysis. I really think being 58 years old, having lived these many decades, having been cognizant and perceptive my whole entire life and intellectually precocious, I have done enormous amounts of research in virtually anything and everything that we discussed tonight. So even though I don't consider myself an expert in anything, because I don't think there really is such a thing,
we agree with that.
I do believe that I've got my finger on the pulse. And one of the things that I think that we need to come to terms with is that we are ultimately responsible for ourselves. And I see, in terms of the sustenance and the growth and the perpetuation of humanity. And I see the world now split in a huge chasm, just an enormous chasm. And I can give you a case in point, but I see the world as thinkers with two separate and distinct mindsets. Thoughts are things. Thoughts are things. Nothing that exists in our physical world that is man-made began as a physical object. It began as an idea, right. A concept, a thought, a dream. So the way that we think is very powerful, and I have always espoused the notion that we can heal ourselves as a planet, as a race. We can heal ourselves with the power of our own thought, and persistently positive, loving, embracing emotions, because love is the most powerful emotion, hands down, no competition. Its closest competition is fear. And sometimes fear can override love, but love conquers fear, and love conquers hatred. And hatred is born of fear.
Right.
And what we're dealing with now is a classic, I think, classic example of the struggle between what we perceive and label as good and evil. And I see it very clearly. Although there are many people that don't see it that way, or see it in the reverse, which is frightening to me. But I see two separate, distinct mindsets at work. And one of them is, all for me, you're on your own. And the other one is, we are all in this together. And you can slap a political affiliation on that if you want, or whatever else you want to. But I see it not as that. I see it as two separate, distinct mindsets that are in conflict, that are at war. And good always wins, always, or none of us would be here anymore.
Very, very true.
Well, I do have a couple of questions pending from the chat room. Real quick, little Dorrit is asking simply, how's your mother doing?
My mother is frail. She's going to be 78 years old in August. We just lost my sister April a few months ago. My baby sister April passed away suddenly and tragically. All she did was take the medication that her doctor gave to her, and the combination of drugs that were prescribed for her stopped her heart. Right. She didn't even realize that she had died. When she started coming to us, she said, "Where am I? Because I don't understand. What happened?" I know when her daughter found her, she was sitting up watching TV, and she had already been dead about 10 hours. So when my sister Cindy, who her daughter Jessica called in a panic, started screaming at her to start CPR, it was well past that point. That was the most difficult day of my life, and I was 3,000 miles away from my family. I had just gotten off a plane at LAX to go do a Strange Escapes Paracon on the Queen Mary, and had just pulled my luggage off of the carousel when I discovered the news and called home, since those words were written in bold print on my phone. And I thought it was my mother. I did. When Christine called and left me a message when I was 30,000 feet in the air, I thought it was my mother. I don't know how my mother survived this. I don't know how I survived this.
Right.
I don't. I get up every morning and the first thought that I have when I open my eyes is, I'm still alive. Because I don't know how I survived this.
It's very heartbreaking, lose someone that close to you. And so
our
hearts go out to you, certainly.
Thank you. She was only 51 years old.
Yeah,
she was
too
3
young.
weeks away from her 52nd birthday. Yeah. And it's proof positive that there's nothing fair about life. And a very close friend of mine lost her 15-year-old daughter night before last. There's nothing fair about life. I don't know how any parent survives burying a child. I don't. To me, that's the best reason not to have kids, because I know I wouldn't survive that kind of loss. I was just old enough when April was born to perceive her as my baby without me having to do the birthing. And she was always my little girl, even when we were in our 40s and 50s. And I do feel like I've lost a child as well as a sister.
Right now, there's a lot of love being expressed to you right now by our Mad Hatters in the chat room. So I just want to let you know that they all want to give you a really big hug right now.
I do. I feel it. So just pray for my mom, because I think what saved her, I really think what saved her is that 3 days before April died, she came down and she visited. Well, actually 6 days before, she stayed with my mom for 3 days, and she brought her little dog Sammy with her, and he's the most precious little thing you ever laid your eyes on. He's just a little white puffball and so good, and he was so devoted to April because she saved him from his shelter. And the reason that this purebred, beautiful little dog, Shih Tzu mix thing, beautiful dog, had been given away to the shelter was because somebody kicked him in his face and broke his jaw when he was a baby, and he had a little protruding tooth. And he was turned over because he wasn't perfect. Well, yes, he is perfect. And he saved my mother because April had a sense that something was going to happen. And the day before she died, she called every single one of us in the family. And she called all of her friends. And I talked to her that evening, and she told me, she said, you go to California and you have a wonderful time on the Queen Mary. It was like, it was an order. And we had a wonderful talk. And the last words that I said to her were, I love you with all my heart and soul. I love you as if I had birthed you myself. And those were the last words that I said to her. I don't know how I've gotten through this year, but April told Mom if something happens, because she was having very delicate surgery on her neck, and it could have gone badly. And that's why she was on such heavy painkillers, and they killed her. But before she even had the surgery, it was the night before she was supposed to go into the hospital. And she said to my mother, if anything happens, I want you to keep Sammy. I want you to have Sammy. And now he has become virtually the conduit between my mother and my sister.
Wow.
And it's, she says every time she's petting him or cuddling with him or grooming him or just laughing at the silly things that he does, she feels April with her, and it's the only way that she can cope through this. I know that's a long answer to a short question,
it's fine.
but that's how my mother is, and that's how my family is right now. We're just fighting through every day and wondering if the pain will ever subside enough that any one of us can go through a whole day without weeping. Christine was upset because April didn't come to Chris right away. She came to Cindy right away. And the morning of her funeral, Cindy was asleep and she woke up suddenly and she reached over to her phone and speed dialed April to tell her not to be late for the family function. And when she realized what she was doing and that the family function was her own funeral, which Cindy always told her, you will be late for your own funeral, you will. I mean, that was a running joke in the family because April was never on time for anything once in her entire life. And she started to sob. And she went outside, she grabbed her smokes, and she went out on the back porch, and it was early, first light, and which is really the best time if you want to interact with spirit. That's the best time to do it, is first light. And but she wasn't thinking of all she wanted to do was just be able to stop crying and breathe. And she grabbed the tissues as she went out the door, and she was sitting in her rocking chair, just having a cigarette and just trying to breathe and calm down. And she said all of a sudden, April appeared as a full-body manifestation right in front of her, sitting Indian style, right in front of her, at her feet. And she said she was radiant. She was absolutely beautiful. She glowed with a light Cindy had never seen in her life. And she said, look, now I can sit Indian style too. Aww. And she was gone. She just pushed, she was gone. Aww. And Cindy and Nancy are both for our ages, they're extremely flexible. And April always resented that she had degenerative spinal disease and that she wasn't able to do the things with her body that her sisters were able to. And so she came to show her that she could sit Indian style again. And Cindy said she was absolutely luminescent, radiant. Uh-huh. And she came to see Christine while I was up helping clean out the storage unit and all of that. What the hell did I put makeup on for? I was crying.
You were fine, honey.
Yeah.
Oh, God. And we were sitting, it was my mother and Christine and myself and Sammy. And we were all sitting on the back deck of the house in Georgia. And we had worked for weeks to clean out April's house and her storage unit. She was a wicked pack rat. She kept everything her whole life long. And because of that, I have some of the most beautiful keepsakes now. Right. Beautiful things like this key and things that we found in her storage unit that she had for decades and decades of her life. Just beautiful little things like this. I've got her original pair of glasses. Oh. I've got her, and I keep them right on my desk, right with me. I keep her. That's I have sweet. A little urn of her ashes that I can embrace and tell her how much I miss her. But
that's very sweet.
We were sitting on the deck, and Christine had planted rows of Sharon bushes. Or they were planted. They were already at the house when she bought it years and years ago, and they had turned into monsters. I mean, they're just huge, and they're in clumps all around the side of the deck. And in the middle, there was this section of them that was like freestanding. It wasn't really attached in with the other bushes. And we're sitting there just having a cup of coffee and enjoying the evening light. And all of a sudden, that bush started moving forward, the whole bush, and then moving back, and then moving forward, and moving back.
Oh, wow.
And moving forward, and moving back in perfect syncopation. And Christine's like, Ann, do you see it? You see it, right? I'm like, yeah, I see it. And Mom's like, yeah, I see it. And Christine immediately, being the skeptic that she is about all things paranormal, if it didn't happen to us, she doesn't believe it. She's just nice. Like that. But she grabbed the flashlight that she had brought out to take Sammy into the backyard, and she, shined it down to see if it was a raccoon or if it was a possum or, some natural rather than supernatural explanation. Right. And she turned it off, and she plopped it back down on the table, and she plopped herself back down in her chair, and she said, well, hello, April.
Nice.
Now, and then, of course, me being me, we had to have a conversation about that. And I said, the philosopher in me needs to address this immediately, what you just said. Here's the difference between knowing and believing. We know we saw the bush move. We all saw the bush move. We saw the bush move in a very specific way. And then it stopped after about 15 or 20 seconds. That we know. We believe it was April.
Right.
Now, Andrea, I'm going to try not to cry, because I'm sitting here crying. I have to ask you something. This probably means nothing, but it won't stop. So I have to go ahead and acknowledge it. Was the song Imagine important to her at all from John Lennon?
Yes.
Because it won't stop. It won't stop. It's just in my head.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
She was a big Beatles fan, but particularly loved that song. She was a great lover of music. She was the best and the brightest of us. She was the most beautiful, the most intelligent, the most talented, the most sensitive, the most generous human being I have ever known. In my life, and that I probably ever will know. April was too good for this earth. I'm surprised she made it as long as she did. And she was a wild woman. She was absolutely a wild woman. I mean, there was nothing she feared, nothing. She would do anything once just to try it. She was just one of these individuals that was, I'm fearless, but I'm not reckless. April was reckless. And she made a lot of mistakes in her life, and she was, in some respects, I think, probably a young soul. She had to, find her way in a very Aries, truly a true Aries. And bull in a china shop sometimes, and just dramatically inappropriate. I mean, she was just anything would fly out of her mouth, and you never knew when it was coming. And she had a great command of the language, incredible command of the language. There were many attributes that she and I shared in that respect, and she was a wonderful writer. And she never ever did anything with it because she didn't have enough self-confidence to try to publish. But during the cleaning out of her house and her storage unit, we gathered virtually everything that she ever wrote because she kept everything. And my mother is going through all of her writing this summer. And when I go up and spend some time with her, we're going to start compiling April's writing, and I'm going to posthumously publish them.
Oh, very nice. Very nice.
I have to do that for her.
Was there a book that had music notes on it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Like blue music notes. But
Yeah.
I'm not, it's blue or black. It's really dark, and there's music notes on it, like, I don't know, almost like calligraphy.
Yes.
On there. It's real pretty.
Yeah. I've got it over here in this mess of a bookcase.
One of those mini books back there that we were talking about earlier.
I could start digging. I can't even show you. I had to move my computer and prop it differently to do this show with you guys tonight, because April's stuff has exploded in my office, and I don't know where to put it. I just don't know where to put it. I mean, I've got her bedroom set, and I've got, oh my God. I mean, she was just as much of a book addict as anybody else in my family. So there are thousands of volumes. Mom and Chris still have a bunch. I loaded the van and brought a whole van load down with me. I'm going back up after my event next weekend. I'm going to be at the Ocean State Paracon in my hometown of Harrisville, Rhode Island. Mike, you've got to come. You guys have got to come to this.
I would love to go.
It's just amazing. It's amazing. Ken DaCosta and Rise Up Paranormal.
You and I will have to talk afterward about that.
Yes, we have to get you there because really, it's such an incredible event. So I'm leaving on Thursday to go there, and then when I come back to Florida, I'm going to turn around and drive back up to Villa Rica and load the van load. Poor Christine. I mean, if I think my house is cluttered with April stuff right now, it's nothing compared to what Christine's dealing with. So, I'm going to just start taking it out one van load at a time. I'm the only one that's got storage space. I've got a whole barn behind my house that's empty. So there's just no excuse for me not to take it.
Yeah.
But, I got to show you this. I just have to show you this.
Sure,
This is so cute. Hold on just a minute.
All right.
Do I look too bad?
No,
you're
great. No, I
you're
know.
fine.
I'm
You're good. You're all good. You're both very beautiful, so
April,
you're fine.
her favorite holiday, both of them were Easter and Christmas. And we were going through her storage unit, and I found these at the very, very bottom of a box that somebody had packed her kitchen when she was moving, and I hadn't seen them in 25 years. Are they not the most precious?
Oh, they're cute. Yeah.
Aren't they so cute?
Those are cute.
And to have they're just salt and pepper shakers. That's all they are. But oh my God, I understand now. I've never been one to covet stuff. I never have been. It's like I give away more than I have on a regular basis. Every time I move, I give half of my belongings away and then start again, because people give me so many beautiful gifts, and, it's just, I keep the things that are precious mementos, but, usually things that I buy for myself, I just give away, and then I go get something else to replace it. But now I understand why people get so weirded out about possessions when a loved one dies. I really do, because having her things around me is comforting. It's just comforting.
Yeah. Uh-oh. Wow, we just lost Skype. And so, hang on a second. Skype just totally crashed out on me. So I'm going to have to bring him back up. And that was in the middle of a heck of a moment. So give me just a minute here while I do this. Figures, in the middle of all that, Skype has to go and die. So, alright. It's a lot of you are saying, having things of your beloved is important. I know last year when I lost my uncle, I have a number of his things around here. So let's bring everybody back. And, it's haunted. There you go. So I'll bring Andrea back first, since she is our guest. Hello, Andrea. Hi. You back?
I am. I'm here.
Okay, great. That was Skype just completely. Yeah, Skype just completely bombed on me, so it was on my end. Let me get Vanessa back.
Okay.
So the live feed is still there, which is good, but Skype just crashed.
Well, sometimes I do that. I don't mean to.
There's all that powerful energy.
Yes, I know. Sometimes it is, but when did it happen? As soon as I started talking about spirits and ETs. As soon as I said
once you started changing the subject a little bit into that, yep, that's when it happened.
And it said, ooh.
So
We're not I do that.
Yep, now it's getting real here.
Now it's getting real. So, well, why don't we go ahead and just segue into that, since, and Andrea, I mean, that whole part of the show was very, very beautiful. There were so many people in the chat room that just were spiritually hugging you at the time, and so it's, you know, it was a very, very emotional moment, but, you know, and our hearts go out to you, but, Vanessa, you totally broke up. But let's go ahead and get into our topic for the evening, which is interdimensional beings. And I know, Andrea, you have so many things to say about these entities. Go ahead, take it away. Where do you want to start?
I want to start with the reason I get up every morning. And the reason I get up every morning is so that I can go outside and greet the galactic family. There is in my world, in my netherworld, I see multidimensionally, extra-dimensionally, interdimensionally, however dimensionally you want to describe it, I see that way. And I have since I was a child, ever since I saw my first full-body apparition that appeared absolutely solid to me, and I greeted him as I walked past him at the farmhouse the day we moved in.
Was that Manny?
Manny, yes, yeah. Very good memory, Mike, very good. I love them. I higher love them. I love them in a way that I have not felt as an earthbound entity myself. I love them in a way that is universal in nature, that is prime creator in nature. I love them for coming. I thank them for coming. I have seen far too many things in my life to ever for an instant, not for an instant, to doubt what I have seen. And so I guess the way, you know, I know what I know. And I don't care who believes me, you know, because therein lies the difference between knowledge and belief. And I don't care who believes me. My message is for those who are open to the notion that we are not alone in the universe. And there is a very distinct difference between spirit activity and extraterrestrial. Extraterrestrial is sentient, spiritual, highly evolved, highly intelligent, enlightened beings, for the most part. There are a couple of races that have visited this planet that have done harm to humanity because they're a combination of humanoid and AI, and they're scientists. And they don't care what damage they do. They're just here to study and learn from us or learn about us. But for the most part, the beings that I am connected to, that I feel profound connections to, are the Pleiadians, the Arcturians, and the Anunnaki, which are the most ancient races that have affiliations with the planet.
Right.
Some people might say, how do you know this? Not only do I know this from decades of research, there's nothing that's ever been written about extraterrestrial engagement with humanity that I haven't read and absorbed. It doesn't mean that I just took it, you know, as a matter of fact. I studied and I learned, and when I was 13 years old, I had an event happen to me and we were living at the farm already, you know, we were already dealing with the ghosts and the, you know, and all of that. But I saw an entire flotilla of ships pass over the farmhouse, and I saw colors in the sky that I had never seen before, and I have not seen since. It changed everything. It changed absolutely everything. It turned on a light switch. I went from living a black and white life to a technicolor life in a split second with my first visualization of this series of ships that blocked out the sun and silenced the birds. And I didn't tell my mother for years because, there were things going on in the house that she was dealing with, and I just didn't want to pile on. And I didn't even think that I should. I thought that my sighting of that was very personal and very intimate. And I didn't share it for a long time. But I found out 35 years later that the exact same time that I saw the flotilla, an entire flotilla of vessels, all in geometric forms with one huge, massive ship in the center, were seen on radar passing from Nova Scotia to southern Maryland. They cut across the Atlantic Ocean, made a tour of Western Europe, and when the Royal Air Force scrambled their fighter jets to go after it, in a split second it disappeared off the radar over the North Pole and was gone. And it took 35 years for me to find out that that had happened at precisely the same time that I saw it. My first initial reaction to that was, how many people filed reports?
Yeah.
Well, it was over 10,000 reports that were filed. But when you think of the vast land masses that it covered, that were populated areas, heavily populated areas, and there were 10,000 reports, let's say, of those 10,000 reports, that was only 1% of the people that actually saw it.
Yes, a lot of people don't report that, yeah.
Still leaves countless millions who didn't see it. And so the pertinent question is, why didn't they see it when we did? I believe that there could have been somebody standing in my yard with me, who would not see that pass over the house as I did. And I used to think differently about that. I used to think that if everybody, if anybody has gifts, then everybody has gifts. But I don't think that anymore. I think that there are some of us on this planet that are capable of, I think that there are some of us that have either been tinkered with and are hybrids, or there are some of us that have innate understanding or come to this plane of action, understanding that we are not alone, neither in the 4th dimension or the 5th dimension or the 11th dimension, that we are not alone. I don't know, but all I know is that countless millions and millions and millions of people were beneath that thing when it crossed over these huge, enormous land masses.
And let me ask you this, why do you think they were flying over at the time? What was their goal?
Well, I can only assume that it was to make contact with their own. That's what I assume. And when I say that, I feel uplifted. When I say that, I feel like, almost like I can fly. It's because I know that I am one of their own. And it took me years and years to, I felt like, Michael, I have discussed this with you personally. We've had many talks, and I have felt like a misfit on this planet my whole life. Like one toe on the planet, my head in the clouds. I just like...
I've heard you say that many times, yeah.
Yeah, what am I doing here? What is this? Yeah, it's pretty, but ew, what is this?
Yes.
And it wasn't until about 8 years ago when I published the first book, and I realized that there were many, many others like myself. Oh my God, he's putting up his own copy. You are so sweet. And I realized that, and I'm grateful for the movie The Conjuring, even though it's not an accurate depiction of what happened. If it weren't for that film, my books would likely be languishing in obscurity. It was that movie that brought them to the attention of the world. And so now I'm writing the screenplays. I've got a free movie deal for the trilogy. and some really powerful people that are involved in this project, and I'm very excited about it. And I get to tell the world the real story on film because I'm the one that's writing the screenplay.
And I have the book out because there is so much. I mean, the Conjuring is really, really very different from your account within the book, and there's so much more within your book of the things that happen. But not just that. There's a lot of things spiritually that happen to you, and other phenomena that, of course, didn't get examined in the movie. One of them that I thought was really fascinating was you described when some of this activity was going on in the house, the bubble that it would seem that you guys would be in, and to me that seems like some sort of crossing of dimensions right there, where the real time and some other time were crossing each other, and I'd love to get a little bit more detail from you as to exactly how that was and what you think that sort of phenomena had been.
Well, I think that in terms of our discussion tonight about interdimensional beings, probably the very best story that I can share with you, and I know you'll remember this well, it was a very emotional story in the books. My mother was degrading. My mother was wasting away. It was after the seance with the Warrens that took such a tremendous toll. It almost cost her her life. And she came out of her room. I became like the third parent. My father, of course, traveled, had his own business. He wasn't a truck driver. He had his own business, and he traveled a great deal for his clients. And so I became the third parent as my mother struggled with what had happened to her. And she came out of her bedroom one night about 11 o'clock, and I was sitting on the sofa doing my homework, and I had made beef stew for the girls, and cleaned up the kitchen and got the kids all put to bed, and I was doing my homework at that point, and my mom came out of her room, and it was cold. It was, I think, probably around October, and she said, "I'm hungry." And I was thrilled. I mean, I immediately slammed my book closed, like, "Yes, ma'am. What would you like to eat?"
Right.
Because she was just wasting away. She was waif-like. And she said, "What did you make for dinner?" And I said, "I made beef stew." And she said, "Oh, I would love some beef stew and some coffee." I'm like, "Mom, it's 11 o'clock at night. You're going to drink coffee?" And she's like, "It's the nectar of the gods."
That's true.
It is. And so, of course, I walked from the parlor through the dining room that was completely closed down for the night. All the lights were off. Walked through the front foyer, through the kitchen, into the pantry. I was about 150 feet away from her. Before the day of microwaves, I had to pull the stew out of the refrigerator and warm it up on the stove and pull out the Farberware pot and clean out the grounds and make more coffee. And, so I was gone for about 15 minutes, at least, preparing dinner for her. And in the interim, she grabbed a log out of the wood box and moved the screen and threw a log on the last log of the night on the fire. And as she was placing the screen back in front, she heard laughter behind her. And she turned and looked into our dining room, and she said all the furniture had changed. There was a hand-hewn oak table in there with benches on both sides. The fireplace that had been sealed shut, the center chimney gone for more than 100 years before we bought the house, was open. There was a fire raging in it. There was a pot of stew cooking over it, and a woman stirring it who was wearing a full-length dress and chastising her two little boys to go take their seats at the table. There were two men sitting at the other side of the table. They had pewter stuff in front of them, which is indicative of the 1700s because pewter was outlawed in the 1800s because of the lead content.
Right.
And my mother just stood there on the hearthstone of the fireplace and watched this family having dinner in our dining room. And one of the men turned and looked into the parlor and made direct eye contact with her, and then nudged the man beside him and pointed my mother out. And she was the ghost.
Right.
She was the ghost to them. They were peering into the future at the same time she simultaneously was peering into the past.
This has been a topic of discussion. This is something that we have all wondered about.
Yeah, we haven't talked about this a lot lately.
Yes, I've been in the same situation as your mother, where they have looked at me as if, what in the hell? Because of what I was wearing, or the way that I spoke, or my mannerisms were not like the time that they were actually in. I have been in that situation, and people have often asked me, they're like, do they see us the same way we see them? And I'm like, sometimes yes, but on that rare occasion, they look at us with the same type of disbelief as we do them. And it's such an odd moment. It's indescribable, that moment.
It is. It is. Well, all I know is when I came back through the front foyer and walked into the completely dark dining room, my mother was standing on the hearthstone smiling from ear to ear, because that was her moment of epiphany at the farmhouse. That was the moment when she realized that it was all shared space, and that there was a skewing, a crossing of the lines of dimensions, that it was a portal cleverly disguised as a farmhouse, and that there was nothing even remotely threatening about. She was glimpsing, she had that, I wrote about this. I even put it on a coffee mug. It's such a great, somebody said, you have to sell coffee mugs. You love coffee. You have
right.
to. Oh, right. So what I did was I put this quotation on my coffee mugs, and that is, to be touched by spirit is a blessing, not a curse. Is that rare glimpse into the realm from which we come and will inevitably return. Be not afraid.
That's perfect.
That's great. That's fantastic. Well, let me ask you this. I know you and I have talked about this before, and this is the edge of the rabbit hole, so we go down the rabbit hole. So time is not the way we traditionally think of it. It's a human construct that we put together to explain how we experience the world. So there in the farmhouse, it seems that you had that moment where time didn't exist, even though it doesn't really truly exist anyway.
Right.
So.
Well, it's all an illusion, but I'll tell you, based on my research and what I've learned from some astrophysicists and some people who make me look like a blithering idiot. They've got so many degrees. Dr. Stephen Greer and the Honorable Paul Hellyer, former Defense Minister of Canada. People like this that have privileged information that is hidden from the general population and is only dripping out a little here and a little there. What they're basically telling us is that from what they know and from what has been shared from other races with us, that all these other races have time too. It's all based on their solar system, and it's based on their rotation around their sun, or however, there's the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Everything in that film is absolutely true, except that the exchange didn't happen at Devil's Tower, Wyoming. It happened at Area 51. And 13 pilgrims left this planet, were scrubbed clean of any identity, had no family, were leaving nobody behind to wonder where they went. And they were supposed to go to another planet with our friends and our visitors for 10 years. Well, not all of them came back. One died on planet, one fell in love and decided to stay. But they were sent with enough battery life to last them to tell time on that planet for 10 years. And the batteries died. because a year on that planet was different than a year on this planet. And they were gone for more than 13 years before they were returned. And so time does exist as a construct, not just of humanity, but of other races as well. And it is how we measure our days and our nights and our cycles and all of that. And it seems, so perfectly logical that we should do that as a machination to create that sense of order and semblance of organization in our lives.
That's what we do as humans. We like to organize.
Yeah, exactly. And we like to post-it note labels on every frickin' thing that exists, It's like, oh, this is good, and this is bad, and this is ugly, and this is beautiful. And it's like, how about it just is?
Yeah.
How about it just exists? Why do we have to condemn or, promote it? It just is. But the truth, and the reason that I wrote the books, and I remember talking to you about this as well, Michael, is because they're chronological, sort of. Like the beginning of the first book is absolutely chronological until we get to the farm. And then all bets are off. And then at the end of the third volume, it's chronological, to the end of the story, but it's a never-ending story because, we're all, not all of us anymore, but our family is mostly alive and able to continue on this saga. Right. But I wanted, the reason that I wrote it the way that I did, and I compartmentalized the types of hauntings that were occurring in the house, and, put chapters and sub-chapters in, was because I wanted to rip the reader out of linear time. It was deliberate. I wanted my reader to have that sense of timelessness, to read a story about something that happened to Nancy at 9 years old, and then the next story, something that happened to Nancy at 14 years old, and for the reader to stop and say, oh my God, well, how do these correlate? Well, look at that. Right. Look at how these two stories correlate with each other. And it rips them, and some people hate it, and I promise the movies aren't going to be like that. The movies are absolutely chronological. The book is not, because the book is a spiritual journey. And Michael, you can attest to the fact that when you're done with volume 3, the timeline is perfect in your memory of reading the story. It's absolutely perfect. And I can't explain how that happens, but I've had thousands of readers say, oh, it threw me a little bit at first. What was happening here? And then I realized
it was a little disjointing at first, but then I understood, what you were doing with it, and the books caught me at like the perfect time. When I first bought, the first book, I started reading it, but I wasn't ready for it yet, and so there was a part of me that still had to grow and mature a little bit, and then I came back to it and just went through them all, just boom, 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 and so it's like a spiritual awakening going through. There's so much you learn. Not just about what happened to you, but you learn about yourself as well, and you start thinking of the world in different terms. It's really, really fascinating. It just really, sparks the imagination, but also your spiritual self as well. So it's absolutely fantastic.
Thank you, sweetheart.
You're welcome.
Well, I wasn't trying to manipulate people or jerk anybody around. I just wanted them. It came out of me. It came out of me exactly the way that it was supposed to. And I had a lot of spiritual guidance and help. I truly did, because, there were nights that I would push myself away from the desk and say, I absolutely cannot do this. Why did I ever think that I could do this? I can't do this. And tears are pouring down my face, and I'm having to remember painful things that I would just as have soon forgotten. And something would push me back into the desk in my chair. Something would literally push me back up to the keyboard. 2, 3 o'clock in the morning at my sister's house in Georgia. And I would just hear, keep going, keep going. And I would hear it here, not in my ears. I heard it right here. And I recognized the voices from my childhood. And I knew that I was supposed to do this, not only as a testament to my family, but a testament to the spirits. And they were the first to be acknowledged in my acknowledgments. Pages of acknowledgments, but they were the first. Because I couldn't have done it without them. And I remember one of the last times that I visited the house was right after I had finished the third book. And there was a sense of peacefulness in that house that I had never felt before. It was like being steeped in drawn, warm butter. Just, they were so delighted that their story had been told. And Bathsheba was so delighted that I think she thinks she's been vindicated by the book.
Well, good.
I was going to ask you about that because watching the movie, and I know what it was supposed to relate. I know that what it was supposed to incite, and I get that. You've already said that it didn't follow exactly what happened, but I always felt for her.
Yeah.
I can't help it. I always felt for her like there's something missing, you know, and I don't want to sit here. It's not that I'm rooting for the bad person, but I felt like I was understanding the misunderstood. Does that make sense?
Yeah, she really got a raw deal. I mean, not only did she live a miserable life being accused of, you know, I don't know if she killed that child or not. I don't know. I don't. But I do know that she lived a very long and painful life after that incident occurred where a child died in her care. I don't know why she was at the Arnold estate. She wasn't an Arnold, even though we were told that she was. The fact is that she was the offspring of a marriage between the Taft and the Fair families, two of the oldest families in New England that came over as original pilgrims, and then followed Roger Williams down to the Rhode Island colony out of Massachusetts Bay Colony. And she married Judson Sherman and lived at the Sherman farm about a mile away from our farm, as the crow flies, about a mile. And I don't know why she was there, and I don't understand what her attachment is to the farmhouse. And but I do know that she was not the one that was tormenting my mother. Mrs. Warren said she was the one tormenting my mother, and it stuck. And so The Conjuring got made with, villainizing Bathsheba Sherman.
Right.
And I've done my best over the course. You remember, Mike, in Volume 3, one of my favorite chapters in all 3 volumes is Season of the Witch, where I go through as far back in history. It's a history lesson.
Yeah.
Predominantly, what predominantly women, not exclusively, but predominantly women suffered, and how many died because of a single word, and then used that opportunity, to declare that we need to be very careful what we say, that words are very powerful and words can be used as weapons, and words are what declare wars. You know, so we need to understand that not only was she punished in life, but she was punished in afterlife because of the rumors and innuendos that continued to swirl around her. You know, the way I look at it is, you know, she couldn't have been guilty if they allowed her to be buried in consecrated ground at the church. And then there are others that say that's just her headstone, she's not really there. You know, there's still rumors circulating that we heard from 3 different historians who went back as far as, well, when we met Mr. McEachern, he was in his 80s, and he knew Bathsheba Sherman when he was a boy. She was born in 1812 and died in 1885.
Yeah, that was interesting getting an account from somebody who had actually known her and interacted with her.
Yeah, and he's the one that told my mother the majority of the stories about her. And nobody faults him for being inaccurate in a few of the details. But, you know, and none of us know for sure who the spirits were in the house. Vanessa can attest to the fact, you can attest to the fact, Mike. That's not how it works. They don't walk up to you and say, hello, my name is. And my mother always said, it doesn't even matter who they were anymore. That they are still existing in some form is the miracle. Right. It's proof of the existence of an afterlife. It's empirical evidence of proof of the fourth dimension. Now, the beings that we interact with, the figures, extra-dimensional figures, in engagement with extraterrestrials, they're living, breathing, quite alive. But I do believe that there is some integral correlation between spirit activity and extraterrestrial activity. And I think it's because it all falls into extra-dimensional sight for us.
Yeah. I have been doing a poor job with the chat room. They've had a number of questions that I just haven't gotten to. So sorry, everybody. Way back, Tammy Heitzman asked if the farmhouse is on a ley line.
Yes.
Right. That's what I thought. A lot of people are asking how your dad's doing.
My dad's kick ass. I can't keep up with my father. He is going to be 82 years old in August. My mom's going to be 78. And he's going to spend his second birthday hanging out with me at the Upper Peninsula, Michigan Paracon, lecturing with Chris Quarantino from the Amityville Horror, and I think Carmen Reed. And we're going to spend an entire weekend tearing it up in Michigan at one of the best Paracons in the country, hands down. And the last weekend of August. So I can't keep up with him. He has more energy than Carter's got liver pills. I just don't know what planet he's from. And that's the short answer.
Okay, and then Super Woody Boy asked if Christine has opened up about her experiences at the farmhouse.
Well, she finally did, as Mike can attest to. It was like pulling hen's teeth. It wasn't in... thank you for that question. I appreciate it. Christine was the one that struggled the most. Right. And it wasn't until we started compiling notes so that I would have authentic first-person... Mike, a lot of the books, a lot of sections of the books are written verbatim, directly from interviews that I conducted with my own family. So it took a long time for Christine to open up. And when she did, she spilled her guts. And then she said, that's it. We're not talking about this again. There's no need to talk about this ever again. There are still things that happened at that farm that we as a family cannot discuss in front of her without her dissolving into tears. Right. So always very cognizant and mindful of that. She is the one that internalized and suppressed her emotions around that more than anything. And she was also approached by the spirit that Mrs. Warren named Bathsheba. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that Mrs. Warren didn't pick up on Bathsheba. I mean, she came into that house blind. She didn't know any of the history of it. And for her to have picked up on that name is indicative of something. But then for her to cop the blame for everything, malevolent that happened in the house was just not fair. And of course the Warrens were, very much into demonology and everything was a demon. I've never seen a demon. I don't know what a demon is. I don't know if demons exist. I don't know if angels exist, even though Cindy said she's seen an angel and she's absolutely sure. And I'm not sure if they exist, but they're not an extraterrestrial race. I don't know. All I know is that there is true, pure goodness in the world. And I believe in a creator. I believe in God. Because when things were hell on wheels in that house and we were at a point of crisis, all you had to do was say, God, help me. Dear God, please help me. And mean it. And it stopped. Whatever it was stopped. And every time, not once in a while, every time. So it's, Christine really struggled with that. Chris doesn't even want to talk to me about extraterrestrials. She's terrified. Absolutely. Christine is, and I say this with the deepest affection, my sister Christine is a fear-based carbon unit. And to this day, she understands, she even, and I wrote about it in the books too, she said, I don't know if the spirit that came to me that was the same one that was mean to Mom, it didn't feel like she was so ugly that it terrified Chris. With the sprigs of hair and the hornet nest kind of face and hollow eyes and jagged teeth and, holes for nose. She was grotesque looking. Yeah. Clearly a broken neck, her head hanging right off the shoulders. And Bathsheba didn't die of a broken neck. Bathsheba died in 1885 of a stroke. And she died of paralysis. It shut her brainstem down. But Chris said, I don't know if she was trying to lean over to kiss me or to embrace me. But she said, as badly as it scared me, I felt love from her. Yeah. I felt love from her. And I was mean to her, and I screamed and I ran. And, she said to me, I hope I didn't hurt her feelings. This is...
it's an interesting dichotomy. You're talking about, this very horrible visage, but then that feeling of love. So it's, that juxtaposition like that is, very, very odd. But I can understand the confusion there.
Well, to this day, she's confused.
I have to ask you this, just because of what you described. Was there a woman who burned?
Yes.
I'm not claiming to know anything, but the person that I see is a burn victim, and her face is gone, and I don't feel anything mean or awful for her, but I feel that she was treated mean and awful because when people see that, especially,
well, we don't know.
Oh, Vanessa's really breaking up.
Yeah, we're losing Vanessa.
Uh-oh.
There she is.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
There was a woman named Harmony Arnold that died in the house, and we don't know exactly how she died, but Mrs. Warren said that she got burned to death making candles.
Wow.
Because they had to make their own candles because that was their light source. And there's a room down in the cellar that Cindy would see fire in. Cindy would see fire in it, and she would see blood on the walls. And it was the candle. It was the candler room. And, we don't know. All we know is what we saw, and what we smelled, and what we felt. What we heard, what our five senses and then our sixth could pick up on in the house. But, that's why I said earlier, there are no experts. If my family's if we don't know exactly what it was that we saw, if we don't know, living in that steeped in that environment for a decade, then there isn't anybody that can answer this. And, woe be unto you if you're out there in the world, peddling this, here are all the answers, you're a fraud and you're living in bad. Because I don't know if we're even supposed to have all the answers. I don't know that we are. That's part of the mystery of life. It's what piques our curiosity. It's what keeps us growing and evolving and learning, is because we want to know. We are conscious, cognizant, cogent human beings. I think, therefore I am. And I turned that around in a college thesis. That was René Descartes, the great philosopher. Right. And I wrote a thesis called I Am, Therefore I Think.
There you go. Yeah, but I do really love how, you're somebody that, people look to as an expert, but you'll be the first to say, I'm not. And you would think, with all the experiences that you've had, you would be able to make that claim, but you don't, because there's so many mysteries.
I would consider that
in this world.
so arrogant. I don't even have that kind of ego in my body.
Yeah.
I do not. I don't. And, you know, I open a lot of lectures with this particular line. It's one of my favorite quotations from me. And that is the safest assumption that we can make is that we know nothing compared to what there is to know.
Yeah, and even though I have to ask you because it's something it has come up for me a lot lately. As far as like topics of conversation, I've had some interviews on it. I've done a presentation on it recently. Your take on shadow people and the type of entities that they are. I personally believe they're interdimensional. What say you?
Okay, I'm going to lighten it up here now for just a minute because I saw a really great T-shirt the other day.
Okay.
That says, Bigfoot saw me and no one believes him.
That's awesome.
I saw that. I love that.
It's kind of like the fishermen, and they catch the fish and throw the fish back, and the fish goes back into the water and says, "I got abducted. I got abducted." I bet you didn't. What are you talking about?
The Mad Hatters in the chat room are cracking up.
Well, you know, shadow people are, I mean, honestly, if I had the door open to my office right now, I'd probably see our spirit in the house here just waltz right through my bedroom and right down the hallway, and he's a little old man, and he's kind of hunched over, and I see him as a semi-opaque, grayish mist, but in form. And sometimes I see him that way, and sometimes we just hear him, and sometimes it sounds like he's using a battering ram on the kitchen door, and you know, I mean, he's very rambunctious, and as we talked about earlier before we started the show, he's not that fond of me. He thinks the world of my father, loves my father. You know, the bee's knees. Me, not so much. But I'm working on him. But I see him as a shadow figure. I've seen things outside. I've seen things in the sky. I've seen things on the ground that told me that wasn't a spirit, that was extraterrestrial. Mm-hmm. I think that probably Bigfoot, if Bigfoot exists, Bigfoot is most likely an interdimensional extraterrestrial race that comes and goes off the planet as they see fit and enjoys the mountains.
I've heard a lot of people saying that lately. Yeah.
You know, I also know that there are some filmmakers such as George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, mm-hmm. and some great minds, including Gene Roddenberry, including Roy, what's his name, Twilight Zone. I mean, these people were privileged to have some information that the rest of us didn't. I don't know if it was downloaded into their minds or their memory banks. I don't know if they were given information that was government secrets. I don't know if they had friends in high places or friends in really high places. I don't know. But that Chewbacca came into existence is not a coincidence.
Right. He looks just like Bigfoot. I mean, if you were to put them side by side, yeah.
Yeah.
I never thought of that.
The Ewoks, it's not a coincidence. Mm-hmm. You know, there are 57 documented races from around the galaxy that have visited this planet. That's documented. 57 different races. And some of them, you never hear me call them aliens, because they're no more alien to this planet than we are. And in fact, I'm not saying that they're indigenous, but then again, I don't think that we're necessarily indigenous either. You know, that's an argument that I have with my mother, because my mother comes squarely down on the side of evolution. Right. And I think there's been some tinkering and some tampering.
Well, you could get all into the Anunnaki and all that going down that road.
I think it's just as conceivable that extraterrestrials came to this absolutely magnificent planet and plucked the most intelligent creature off of it that they could find, which would have been one of the great apes, and started messing around.
Very possible. Very possible.
Yeah,
I do. Well, you know, we're blue-eyed and green-eyed people didn't even exist on this planet prior to 60,000 years ago. We showed up, blue-eyed, green-eyed people, showed up on this planet after the last ice age. And, you know, when I go and lecture at UFO symposiums, oh, hold on, I gotta move my back, I'm so old and decrepit. Motrin, where's my Motrin? Oh, God, it's not even in here. When I go to these symposiums and lecture at Starworks and things like this, I ask a series of questions, and there's usually 300-400 people in the conference room, and I ask 3 questions. Do you have blue or green eyes? Most of the hands go up. Are you firstborn or an only child? Most of the hands go up. Do you have the Rh negative blood factor? Most of the hands go up. Less than 3% of the world population has the Rh negative blood factor. Why are they all in the same conference center at the same time?
Yeah, they all flock together.
Birds of a feather do tend to flock together. I tell them, none of you are here by accident. None of you staggered in off the road and just kind of fell into this. You are here with purpose and reason. You were drawn to this event for a very specific reason. And if anybody wants to hear the story of my lifetime, I will be telling it at the Starworks Symposium in Laughlin, Nevada in November. And you can go to my wall and find, I can't even get into it now. I can't. I have to, there's some things that I have to take care of first about this. And I don't want to tip my hand too much, but a few months ago, not long after April's death, I had the most incredible experience of my entire life. And in the process of having that experience, I was gifted with some actual physical evidence, something I've been waiting for my whole entire life. And this will be discussed at the Starworks Symposium.
Wow, sounds like we have to get down there.
You know what?
That's only a 15-hour drive for me, darling. You might see me.
Well, you know, together it's like 7.5 hours each, you know. I mean, honest to God, a couple of hours on a plane, it's worth it. This is like graduate school for ufology. It's really the most incredible, you know, some of the smartest people on this entire planet are working on this. And, you know, everybody's pounding their fist, disclosure, disclosure. I was among them for a long time. But I have come to understand that this has to be a gradual process. That
you think the world's just not ready for it?
I don't think that people are ready for this, Mike. I don't. Based on what just happened to me a few months ago, and the reaction of so many people who I showed it to, I would say, and these are people that are highly enlightened. I didn't show it to anybody outside of my family and my close circle of friends. These are people who are totally on their game and totally enlightened and still freaked out. So if these people are having difficulty coming to terms with what they saw, can you imagine? You know, I wrote a thesis a while back called The Chicken and the Egg. And one night I was laying in bed, it was last year, sometime, time's irrelevant, doesn't matter when the hell it was. I rolled over in bed, and I always wake up around 3 o'clock in the morning. I don't know why, I always have, I always will. I just wake up, between 3 and 3:30, I wake up. But I woke up and my skin was crawling. I mean, I was just like I had been struck by lightning. I was electrified. And I went outside and took a cigarette with me and lit it up, and then I looked up into the sky and I said, what? What is it? And I had an instant flash, just a flash. See? The power of suggestion, Vanessa. I see that. See, I'm telling
She picked it right up, too.
I have to go outside, so I have to wait till we're done before I can. I wrote this thesis, and the flash that I had was of being at a chicken farm with my mother and father, all of us, at a chicken farm, not long after we moved to the farm in Harrisville. And we crossed over the border. We were right in the corner of Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island. We crossed over into the border, Connecticut, and went to a chicken farm. And in that chicken farm, there was a section where the baby peeps were going to be born. And we can't help the baby be born, because if you do, it will die. It has to peck its way out of the egg. And what she was trying to tell me was that the amount of energy that was required for that chicken to peck its way out of its shell was equivalent to the amount of strength it would need to survive outside the shell. And that's what we are. We have to peck our way out of our own shell. They're not here to save us. They're here to enlighten us so that we can learn to save ourselves.
Agreed. Agreed.
Yep.
Completely.
Well, we are winding down to the end of the show here. So, Andrea, you mentioned the event in November. What else do you have coming up, and how can everybody find you?
Well, I'll be in Rhode Island in July, this coming weekend.
Yep.
I'll be at the Ocean State Paracon. Fabulous event. We're raising money for the Rhode Island Coalition Against Domestic Violence, a scourge in our country and around the world. That money helps a lot of women. Excuse me. And then I'm going to be in Michigan for the Upper Peninsula Michigan Paracon, the 24th through the 27th of August. Then we're doing a hippie Woodstock festival out in Panama City in September. And then in October, I will be in Michigan for a number of different events at Mackinac Island for Strange Escapes, at the in Petoskey for that event. Everything will be on my wall. I'm lecturing with John Tenney, one of my very favorite human beings. Oh my
John's
God,
awesome.
I love John Tenney. I love that man. And I'm going to lecture with him for the third year in a row at Omara's Irish pub in Berkeley, Michigan. And that will be on my birthday, October 10th. And interestingly...
That is also my mother's birthday, by the way.
Oh, really? Well, that's also John's mother's birthday.
Oh, there you go.
Yes, and he has my mother's birthday, and his family lives in the town called Harrisville.
Nice.
How weird is all of that? Synchronicity, connection, everything is one thing. We're all connected. You just have to find the dots and connect the dots.
Yep.
But I thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm sorry I cried.
Oh,
that was
perfectly
fine. I'm still trying to heal and get back to center. Sometimes I'm there, and sometimes it spirals out, and I never know when the wave's going to hit me. I just don't know. But I'm getting through it. We're all getting through it, and she's still with us.
Yeah.
And that's the thing for people to remember when you lose a loved one. They never really leave you. My mother said there's no need to mourn them. They're not really gone.
Right. Well, and everybody, our Mad Hatters in the chat room are just giving you an outpouring of love. It was actually really beautiful to watch. And right now they're like, no, please don't go. But,
I will come back anytime.
Yeah. And of course, we would love to have you, Andrea. And anybody who's watching that hasn't already subscribed to the channel, please go ahead and subscribe. Click on the little bell for the notifications, and you will find out exactly when Andrea will be back.
You have one of the best shows out there. It's such a pleasure to come on with you, Michael. I love you with all my heart. Vanessa, soul sister, I love you both. Thank you.
We
thank
love you
for
too.
this opportunity.
Thank you.
And good night to the Mad Hatters.
Yes. Good night, Mad Hatters. Everybody have a great night. Till next time.
Yeah.